Welcome, everybody. My name is Brittany Ramsey, and I am our Region H Chair. Our region encompasses Ohio, Indiana, and Northern Kentucky, and we are hosting a virtual celebration this evening with a bunch of fellowship activities for our Founders Day and our 95th anniversary. I would love to welcome a lot of our special guests that joined us tonight, both from our Region H staff, our section chairs, as well as a few of our past national presidents, our current national vice president, and a national board member as well. So you will get to meet them through each of these different decades as we take a trip through our fraternity's history. When each of our presenters get to your decade, please feel free to introduce yourself and share a favorite memory from our fraternity if you want to, and go through your decade of history. To begin tonight, I am going to read our story behind our founding. This is a really special story for our fraternity's beginning, and it's something that we reiterate through our ceremonies and rituals, and I'm sure a lot of different pieces of our fraternity operations. So tonight I wanted to start with the same and go through our story of our founding. During the First World War, I served as an ensign in the United States Navy aboard a minesweeper in the North Sea. Our ship and its partner exploded more than 1,000 magnetic mines. My law school background at Boston University led to my appointment to try court-martial cases in our division. When we reached ports, some of the sailors ran wild. Many court-martial cases resulted. I saw young boys in their teens getting into trouble. Because of these experiences, I made a firm resolution within myself that if I returned alive, I would try to do two things and do them with all my power. First, do my best to help young people get the right start in life by holding up before them a standard of manhood that would withstand the test of time. Second, and just as important, try to help the nations of the world settle their disputes in a more sensible and legal manner than war. After the war, I became a student at Lafayette College. One evening, while attending an American Legion banquet during my sophomore year, I sat next to an inspiring man named Herbert G. Horton. We were not related, but we became fast friends. He too had been a naval officer, but was now serving at the local Scout executive. He helped me to become a deputy Scout commissioner. One of the troops needed a leader, so I became a Scoutmaster as well. Through these experiences, I found that the Scout oath and Scout law were what I had been seeking: a standard of manhood that would withstand the test of time, and a code of ideals created and accepted by some of the greatest leaders the world has ever known. The summer of my junior year was spent as an associate camp director at the Easton Scout Reservation. Here, I was impressed with the religious tolerance in the hearts of boys. This I have not found so easily among older people. Scouts of the Catholic, Jewish, and Protestant faith worked together in everything at camp, and everyone had an opportunity to worship on his Sabbath in his own way. My brothers in the Sigma Alpha Epsilon fraternity house, where I lived, who were outstanding for high ideals and clean living, were all former Scouts. I felt a college organization should be formed that would strengthen men in these ideals and give them an opportunity for leadership experience and for service to others. As a senior at Lafayette College, I talked to some of the men with a Scouting background, and their response was good. These men would join an organization based on the ideals of Scouting. I created the name Alpha Phi Omega, the motto, and the Greek words and their meaning, and I wrote the ritual. Everett W. Probst designed the pin and drew the coat of arms. Thane S. Cooley suggested the hand clasp. Ellsworth S. Dobson and Gordon M. Looney helped write the fraternity's constitution and bylaws. 14 undergraduates signed a charter. The Scouting advisors were Dr. Ray O. Weiland and Herbert G. Horton. The Lafayette College faculty approved the petition for recognition. On December 16, 1925, I conducted the ritual initiation at Brainerd Hall, second floor, and Alpha Phi Omega was born. My purpose was to make Alpha Phi Omega an organization for college men who cooperated with all youth movements, especially Scouting. I also anticipated that our service program would expand to help people in need everywhere and to do service on the campus of each chapter. As Scouting is worldwide, so should Alpha Phi Omega be worldwide, gradually in the colleges and universities of all nations. Alpha Phi Omega can help bring about, through the future statesmen of the world, that standard of manhood and international understanding and friendship that will lead to a better, more peaceful world in which to live and in which to make a living and a life. So that is the story of our founding. It's a really special story to me, and I love hearing it and reminding myself of why it was created and what the purpose behind Alpha Phi Omega was. And before long, let's get started with a trip and a journey through our decade's history. I'll pass it over to you, Katie.
Great. So yeah, I'll start us off in our humble beginnings in the 1920s. For those who don't know me, my name is Katie. I graduated from Theta Upsilon Case Western Reserve chapter in 2014, and so served with Brittany on the Region H staff as our alumni coordinator, secretary in that role. So I live in Cincinnati now, but I've lived in Columbus, Cleveland, all over Ohio. So thinking about the 1920s, a lot of this info I think you guys have heard from the ritual. Definitely some memories unlocked for me, like having gone through it maybe a dozen times. It's like, oh yeah, I remember. So you'll probably hear a lot of like personal stories in some of these decades, but I can't say that I know any of these men personally, unfortunately, but they do feel like long lost friends. But as you guys know, 1925 was when Alpha Phi Omega was founded at Lafayette College in Easton, Pennsylvania. And then a couple years later, the fraternity started to expand a little bit more. So the first issue of Light Bearer was published, and then the beta chapter was established. And I think, you know, the rest is history, but definitely some humble beginnings. And Brittany pulled some, even some images here to put some names to faces. So top left, you see that's Frank Reed Horton, a name that I think we're all familiar with, but even some of these guys you've heard from the ritual, like Thane S. Cooley and Gordon M. Looney. Again, memory is definitely unlocked from hearing them in rituals, and now you can kind of see, oh, these are the guys that started it all.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rachael. I'm currently the Region H Marketing Chair. I pledged Alpha Phi Omega at Alpha Zeta Rho Defiance College in 2009. And then I've served, I think, 1 year on section staff, and the rest I've been on region staff, regardless of what the region was. And then I also present for APO Leads, which I love. And my favorite memory was Chicago. I think that was the one where we had the Atrium Hotel. I can't really remember. I think that was Chicago. And we did the toast song at midnight on New Year's Eve. And that was I was just really cool because, as you can imagine, being in an Atrium Hotel. So that was real neat. All right, and I'm ready for the 1930s. So in 1931, Sidney B. North became the first executive director. In 1931 again, national office moved to Ivanhoe Club building in Kansas City, Missouri. 1931, the Boy Scouts of America officially recognized and publicized APO. In 1931, H. Roe Bartle became national president. And then moving to 1932, we had the first two-letter chapter that was chartered, Alpha Alpha, at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. It's a really long name for school. 1934, our national office moved again to the Land Bank building in Kansas City, Missouri. In 1935, Torch and Trefoil magazine debuted, and you'll see a picture of that next. And in 1939, Bartle initiated the Great Roundup, a nationwide effort to recruit 1,000 new APO members. And these are some cool pictures. So looking at the first Torch and Trefoil. What else is in there? A charter, all sorts of cool pictures.
Hi, everyone. I'm Connor Bradford. I'm the Section H3 chair, so Northwest Ohio. I would say my favorite APL moment probably was convention in Austin, Texas. Just because it was the last time I was the chapter president, I got to be on a reference committee, and then also did, as Brian knows, the little APO Spirit Squad we did for the presentation for the intro for the convention. So that was really a great time, probably one of my favorite memories that I've had. So I'm going to cover the 1940s. So definitely not the best time in the world, but a great time for APO, I definitely will say. So in 1941, APO launched a special war issue of the Torch and Trefoil, calling for an emergency service program for all chapters. So they volunteered with fingerprinting, which is a huge service project to initiated in the 40s, just to kind of cooperate with the FBI. As well. And then in 1942 to 43, APO did sadly lose about 72% of its membership to the war effort. Chapters and national office maintained communication with those serving abroad. I think that's a great thing that they were able to do to keep communication and probably keep brother spirits alive during that time. And then in 1946, H.R. Bartle retired, and the first ever National Pledge class namesake was created in his honor. And they had over 1,000 pledges in that time. And then here's some great pictures of different chapters and of people coming together. Down in the corners, you can see where they did the fingerprinting and really were able to give back. I think this definitely speaks to Frank's definitely mission of APO stepping up in a time of need in service to the world as well. I think you really see that in this year.
Hi everyone, I'm Stephanie. I'm currently the Section H4 chair. I was a member of the Zeta Rho chapter at Wittenberg University, and I graduated in 2016 from there. And I have the 1950s and the 1960s. In 1950, Operation X25, a 10-point growth program to improve chapter operations, was announced in preparation for APO's 25th anniversary. Also in 1950, APO became an international fraternity when the APO Philippines separate entity was established. In 1956, the National Distinguished Service Award was created to recognize members' outstanding service to the fraternity above and beyond. And in 1966, Frank Reed Horton passed away. Here are some pictures from Operation X25. That's about it.
I thought this was a really fun snippet from the Torch and Trefoil. I went on apoarchive.org where you can get digital copies of Torch and Trefoils all the way back from the 20s. And in the 50s, it seemed like there was a huge burst in the amount of digital copies that we had. There definitely was a lot more being printed in this decade, and the editors back then and whoever was contributing as artists and things like that did so many different fun graphics throughout it. So definitely, if you look through the 20s and the 30s and the 40s, it's a lot of just text. And then in the 50s, all of a sudden there's kind of this spurt of new creative energy, which was really exciting to see if you're diving through archives for days like I was. And it was really cool to see these fun quizzes they were putting in and bulletin boards. So I thought this was a really neat feature from our fraternity's history. I've never looked at old Torch and Trefoils before or old publications, so this was really exciting.
Okay, well, I didn't really look at old.
Excuse me, what happened to the 60s? Did I go to sleep?
I'm probably that's what happened to the 60s. Yes.
I did have a comment, Melanie or Brittany, if I could, on the 60s.
Sure, go ahead.
The 1966 convention in Minneapolis authorized a constitutional convention in Norman, Oklahoma in 1967. And it was a body that revised all of our bylaws and our legal documents. And you're probably wondering why I'm telling you this. I'm telling you this because one of the most, I won't say controversial, but debated items was to eliminate the requirement of membership in the Boy Scouts in order to become a member of Alpha Phi Omega. Now, that was not done or not related to the issue of women in Alpha Phi Omega, because that really didn't boil up until the 70s. But that action removed a huge, huge obstacle to women coming into the fraternity when that issue did come up in the 1970s, culminating in the admission of women. And some, I think, Spree, you're going to cover this, but in 1976. So that constitutional convention, for reasons that no one knew at the time, became, really removed what would have been the largest obstacle at the time. We decided to admit women as full members.
Excellent. And that is a fantastic point that Jerry brings up. I think, as we go through and we look through the decades here, it's important to remember that it's all one timeline. It's a tapestry of things, and everything that we are has built upon what came before. All right, so let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Mike Haber, or Spree, as many of the older folks here would know me. I actually pledged at the Epsilon Zeta chapter, which is nowhere near Region H, but that's okay. I've spent a lot of time in Region H. That's up here in Troy, New York, which is where I currently live. And currently in Alpha Phi Omega, I'm on the National Board of Directors. I've done a variety of different things. And I guess I'll say one of the relevant to history, one of the claims that I can make is that I was the Region 2 director for a number of years. And Region 2, of course, in the old structure, included Easton, Pennsylvania, and Lafayette College. And one of the things that we did while I was Region 2 director is we started the process towards rechartering the Alpha chapter, which is now currently active. So nice to have them back. All right, so let's talk about the 1970s. Now, in full disclosure, I was not in Alpha Phi Omega at the time. If I were to tell you my memories of the 1970s, they would probably involve a lot of kindergarten stories of clapping erasers and getting yelled at by nuns in my Catholic school and that kind of thing. So nothing to do with Alpha Phi Omega. So let's go through some of these points, though, because I've always been something of a history buff when it comes to APO. So 1972, as it says here, Lucius Young became the first African-American national president. He was one of the co-founders of the Zeta Phi chapter at Howard University. And that's Lieutenant Colonel Lucius Young. I did have the opportunity to meet him years later, many years later, when he was a past president. Sadly, he has passed away at this point. I enjoyed the few conversations that I got to have with him. I found him to be somebody who was always ready to listen and to talk to any young brother, which I was at the time that I met him. And so, that was certainly a significant achievement in the fraternity. And in full disclosure, there are, of course, other people on this call who undoubtedly knew him much better than I. In 1974, H. Roe Bartle passed away. His contributions to the fraternity really can't be overstated. Without H. Roe Bartle, we very likely would be a shadow of what we are now, if indeed we would exist at all at this point. H. Roe Bartle made very significant advancements to expanding the fraternity, cementing our relationship with the Boy Scouts of America as well. In 1975, Alpha Phi Omega celebrated its 50th anniversary, obviously a very significant achievement. And in 1976, and this is, Jerry alluded to this, and this was obviously one of the most significant actions in the history of the fraternity, the delegates at the 1976 National Convention allowed women to join. Now, as I understand it, I guess again, I wasn't personally there. You know, I was otherwise preoccupied with first grade. The 1974 convention, as I understand it, allowed women to become what were called affiliate members, who, as written, had all of the rights and privileges of active membership, except for certain key things, such as going through the actual initiation ritual that active members went through. So there was that sort of 2-year period where you had a sort of allowing women to be in, but not full members. And in 1976 is when the National Convention said women are allowed to join. It was actually on a chapter determination. The chapter could determine whether they wanted to allow women in. And once a chapter did, there was no going back. And all new chapters chartered indeed had to allow women. And that situation persisted to some degree for decades to come, but it will let future decade presenters address that. In 1977, Alpha Phi Omega initiated our 150,000th member. Obviously, you know, again, a very significant achievement that at that point we had 150,000 formal members initiated into the fraternity. In 1979, the first National Service Day took place, and it's now called National Service Week. And the National Service and Communications member at large at the time, the person who oversaw this, and I think I got that title right, was Stan Carpenter, who went on to become a national president of the fraternity. And I think it's a fantastic thing. You know, the National Service Day was still, at the time that I joined Alpha Phi Omega, it was still National Service Day, and it was meant to be, you know, the first Saturday in November, I believe, when every chapter would work on a particular topic. The idea being to focus Alpha Phi Omega's effort on one particular area that needed service, and to make that big impact in that area nationwide. The same idea still holds true for National Service Week. It's just we, you know, have it spread out over a longer period of time. And also in 1979, the first 3-letter chapter, Alpha Alpha Alpha, of course, was chartered at Maryville College in St. Louis. So, you know, a very significant achievement there. Think about, you know, the chapters that you know and how many of them are 3-letter chapters at this point. It's a significant number of the chapters that we have in the fraternity. And this was the first one back in 1979. So next we have some lovely photographs from the 70s, which I'm sure sport some amazing, amazing clothing styles.
Can I make
as they come up onto the screen?
Can I make a couple of comments about the 70s? I don't mean
I would be delighted to hear them personally, Maggie. So please,
you know
please
what,
do.
Mike, you are beyond awesome. 2 things that I think are relevant. One is, as you say about National Service Week, certainly, you know, getting us all doing service on the same topic was great. But the other thing that sometimes gets lost is, as I've always understood it, the point was beyond that, was to have the Alpha Phi Omega chapters on that campus focus or function more as a steering committee to kind of get everybody to do service, so that we could certainly advertise our organization, but more than that, help other people understand the joy of giving service. And so it was really an outreach to the campus. So that's something that sometimes gets lost that I wanted to point out. And the other part that I have to say is more relevant to me, since that is the decade where we lost H. Roe Bartle. A little piece of trivia, a lot of folks do not know, he was the mayor of Kansas City. The football team, the Kansas City Chiefs, were named after him because his nickname was the Chief. And so I happen to think that's kind of cool. And because my team is the Lions, who can't win against the average high school team, I tend to root for the Chiefs because it's a connection and they actually know how to win occasionally. Thank you.
Absolutely
I
true.
have-
And
I have a comment too, and Maggie stole part of it. She didn't know she did that. But I don't think that many of our students really know enough about H. Roe Bartle. He was a two-term mayor of Kansas City. He was also a member of President Truman's kitchen cabinet, an informal advisor of close Missouri friends that the president could turn to for honest advice. The Kansas City Convention Center is named after him, if you've ever been to Kansas City. As someone mentioned before, I lost track, but he was national president from 1931 to 1946. But what was special about that is in 1931, there were only 18 chapters in the fraternity. And when he retired in 1946, there were 109.
absolutely. And, you know, I suppose it's worth noting, Kansas City Chiefs, current Super Bowl champions, good for them. You know, the H. Roe Bartle is, if you ever spend time in Kansas City, you will get a sense of how important H. Roe Bartle was to Kansas City. I mean, you will find his name in a variety of places over there, and his reach went well beyond, both in Alpha Phi Omega and in the Boy Scouts, and in the world at large, went well beyond Kansas City. And in regards to the National Service Week, Maggie makes a fantastic point that it is intended to be Alpha Phi Omega showing leadership in service. You know, it's about us taking the lead and saying, all right, we do service all the time. Let's bring other people in. Much of the point is to engage others and promote service out in the general community and certainly on the college. And I'll just throw in my last, one last little point here, because it's a favorite memory of mine from when I was a new active and I went to a regional conference, and it's related to this topic. And I heard the fraternity vice president at the time, some fellow by the name of Jerry Schroeder, who gave a speech which I found very inspiring, in which he said, Alpha Phi Omega may not be for everyone, but service must be for everyone. And I took that and I wrote that in pledge books of folks who pledged my chapter for years to come, because I thought that was just an amazing quote. So with that, let me turn it over to the 80s.
Hey guys, I'm Sabrina. I'm the current section H6 chair. I joined Alpha Phi Omega in the spring of 2015 as a petitioner at Zeta Rho at Wittenberg University with Stephanie, who presented a little earlier. And by far my favorite memory was being able to go through that chartering process, rechartering process, because it was a chapter before, and getting to experience that. And then I graduated in 2018 from Wittenberg. All right, so we had a couple cool things from the 80s here. In 1984, the Eternal Flame of Service became a tradition by opening the National Convention in Washington, D.C. And the Eternal Flame is held by the Delta Omega chapter at the University of Houston. So this actually kind of started like a little bit earlier than this. I believe this convention was the first time that it officially opened a national convention. But there's this really cool story. I think it was in 1970 where the Delta Omega chapter was in a room with the new national board members and H.R. Bartle, and they passed a flame around, or used a flame to light a flame that everybody was holding during a ceremony that they were doing in one of the hotel rooms. And that's kind of where this idea of the eternal flame came from. And they took it back to their chapter and kept it lit until they could find a way to hold the flame, which you'll see in the pictures. So the flame is considered to be the spirit of H.R. Bartle too. And then in 1986, Kay Hargrove Krennick became the first woman elected to serve on the National Board of Directors. And she actually, I knew a little bit about her because she was the fall 2014 pledge class namesake. So I got to read about her a little bit during that time. I wasn't actually in the chapter, but when I joined, I was really interested in a lot of stuff. So I read a lot of like the recent magazines and stuff to get caught up. And she, I believe, was also the first woman elected to like hold up, run a national committee. And then she was the first female to be in charge of like a national convention too. And she also has a national DSK. And then in 1986, the national office moved to the Main Mark building in Kansas City, Missouri, which it only stayed at for about 4 years. And in 1988, we took out a $25,000 loan from the endowment fund to computerize the national office and upgrade our resources for members, which really doesn't seem like that long ago. But it was when technology was becoming cool, and we needed it to definitely help our members grow and give them a lot better resources too. Okay, and so the top left, that is Kay, and then next to her is Dr. Heismeyer, one of our other national presidents, with the Eternal Flame. And then
your presentation.
the Love One Another is where the Delta Omega chapter holds the Eternal Flame in on their campus.
I guess I'm on. My name is Jerry Schroeder. I'm a past national president, which means that I have no portfolio and no responsibilities, and I'm loving every minute of it. Let me just comment briefly on something that was just, as Sabrina just said. If you want to know who was the first undergraduate to chair a national convention, a legislative assembly, you will have to attend Story Time with Jerry at some future regional or national meeting. It was a woman, and it happened in 1992 in Boston. That being said, can you switch to the, there we go. In 1990, the National Office Building, the new one, was dedicated. And before that, as we just noted, we were in the Main Mark building, which was not in a good section of town. And actually, it was so bad that the staff leaving at night would have to step over homeless people sleeping in the hallway. So there were many reasons why we wanted a new building and to own our own building, one of which was to have a permanent home. Another reason was to take the rent we were paying out of the budget and pay for a new home with fundraising so that what we were paying for rent could be devoted more towards chapter services. I can tell you a little known fact, having been involved in the planning of that building, that it was designed to last for 50 years. 20 years later, we outgrew it and we're renting space across the street in Independence. And I'm telling you, if you got to have a problem, that's the one to have. Burn the mortgage is related to that because we took out a $300,000 construction loan from the endowment fund, 10-year loan, and we were able to pay it off in 4 years, thanks to the generosity of our volunteers. So in 1994, the undergraduate chair of the National Convention literally burned the mortgage that we could get rid of because we had to pay the loan off in 4 years. The International Council of Alpha Phi Omega, up to this point, we noted earlier that I think it was in 1950 when Alpha Phi Omega, the Philippines, was founded as a separate organization. And there, of course, was cooperation and people visiting each other's conferences, et cetera, but we were two separate organizations. And in order to improve communications and to aid in international expansion efforts beyond the United States and beyond the Philippines, the International Council of Alpha Phi Omega was founded, consisting of, obviously, representatives from Alpha Phi Omega of the United States and Alpha Phi Omega of the Philippines. It was in this decade, and I think this is, somebody else will treat this later, but it was in this decade that we, the United States part of this, decided to stress expansion into Canada. So that was signed at that agreement was signed at the 1994 National Convention by the president of Alpha Phi Omega of the Philippines and myself. I think that's one of the pictures that will come. The only other thing I would add is the other unusual thing that happened in the 1990s, and I wish it could happen again, but the first National Advisory Committee in the history of the fraternity, consisting of university presidents from around the country, was created. It lasted, I think, for about 5 or 6 years and then fell by the wayside, but it was very beneficial and I think an important part of our history. You can move to the pictures now. I haven't looked at them in a while, so I can't really describe them. Obviously, the upper left is the new building, then new building in Independence, Missouri. There's a picture, it's sort of in the middle at the bottom of the mortgage being burnt. And I think to the far right is the copy of the document creating the International Council of Alpha Phi Omega. Lastly, I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself. Maggie, excuse me. I did want to mention very briefly one other thing that happened in the 90s. And that is that we strengthened and reaffirmed our relationship with the Boy Scouts of America. But that effort began with a difficult discussion concerning our membership policies that threatened to end Alpha Phi Omega's relationship with the Boy Scouts of America. Our differences were resolved ultimately when a new Chief Scout executive was chosen, coincidentally a brother from Kansas City, who said, let's fix this. And so we did fix it, and the 1994 National Convention approved certain things that were included in the agreement that required action by the convention. And one of the fallouts from that was that it helped us to more partner organizations, including the Girl Scouts of America, of the United States of America. I mean, it didn't cause it, but it was a catalyst. It helped. So now I'm done.
It'd help if I unmuted. My name is Maggie Katz. I also had the privilege of serving as national president of Alpha Phi Omega back in the day, and get into some memories in a little bit. But just to let you know about myself, I am an alumna from 1980, before most of y'all were born, from, don't hold it against me, Gamma Pi at the University of Michigan. I am Still a big fan of Ohio, despite the animosity that's supposed to go between those schools. And I'm actually rooting for the Buckeyes because somebody from the Big Ten has got to do something decent, and Lord knows Michigan isn't. So we will do what we can. One of the things that I am most proud of, a fond memory, is the U of M, Ohio State. There's a football game, obviously every year, and we do a blood drive surrounding it. That's a fairly popular thing to do now, but when we started it in 1982, back when I was in school, it was the first of its kind, as far as I'm aware. So very proud to have started that tradition, which many other chapters have carried on in fabulous fashion. But we were the first, and it shows how schools like Michigan and Ohio State can play nice, get along, and accomplish some pretty great things. And while Ohio State has been winning the football games far too often for my liking of late, we've been winning the blood drive lately. So it is, we're doing our share. Okay. In the 2000s, we celebrated our 75th anniversary and did it with something called the Easton event, obviously in Easton, Pennsylvania. And it was a pretty cool event for anyone who had the opportunity to be there. As Jerry mentioned, and I apologize for not remembering the exact year, although I know it was after 2006, because I had the privilege of kind of presiding over our first formal memorandum of understanding with the Girl Scouts of the USA. And the one of the individuals who helped make that possible was we'd had a scouting committee for many, many years, and it was usually kind of informally thought of as the Boy Scouts committee. I had the privilege of appointing the first female chair of that, who I believe is on this call, Barb Anderson, who did just the yeoman's work on getting that together so we could sign that first memo of understanding. We've continued to have it so that our relationship with Girl Scouts is not anecdotal, it is a formal one. And so pretty proud of that. First online event registration on apo.org, and now we can't imagine not being official and online. During the 2000s, somewhere in like the 2005 range, decisions were made by the national board that set all, it was mentioned earlier, that women were let into Alpha Phi Omega formally in 1976, but it was still kind of a chapter choice. In 2004, 2005, it was, we set on the track to make it mandatory. And while we gave people a little bit of time so it wasn't kind of a light switch, it was the beginning of all APO chapters being co-ed, a situation that persists, and we're never going back, because from what I hear, women actually can fill leadership roles. I had the privilege of attempting to do that. When I was elected president in 2006, I was the first female president of Alpha Phi Omega. I am very much looking forward. It'll always be cool for me to be the first, but I very much look forward to not being the only in the history of the fraternity, because those types of things, diversity should not be as exciting a thing. It should be a normal thing, if that makes sense. It should be, well, of course we have, we've had presidents who, fill in the blank and who fill in every demographic. And I think that the likelihood of that happening fairly soon is high. But in the meanwhile, I will continue to lord it over anybody where I think I can get away with it, that I was the first, because I am so mature. Also, then in 2008, Torch Topics and Alumni Connection e-newsletters were created as we realized the need for more communication. I did want to tell one story, if I will, not to be outdone by some of the other old farts on this commercial on this presentation. And that is in 2002, I was elected vice president and, was the first female vice president. And I got to say, it was kind of a heady moment for me. I hadn't gone in expecting to run for the office, was very excited when I got elected. And at the closing banquet, the awards banquet afterward, it was kind of nice. A lot of people seemed to want to come up, shake my hand, talk to me, get their picture taken with me. And I will admit, I've got an ego. For anyone who knows me knows that. I was really kind of enjoying it. And it happened during that time. At one point, somebody came up to me and was like, held a camera and went, picture? And I'm like, absolutely, feeling a little bit full of myself. The person handed me the camera because they wanted me to take a picture of them with somebody else. And I have to tell you, I've remembered that. I always remember it. I think that was the best thing that could have happened to me. And to this day, I will admit, when somebody comes up to me with a camera, overwhelmingly, they do want my picture. They want their picture taken with me. But I always remember, I always think to myself, I'm ready to grab the camera because they just may want me to operate the camera. And I like to think that helps me maintain my perspective. And, it's important to take the job you're doing seriously, but not take yourself too seriously in the job. And that situation helps me in that. And so I like telling that story because for any of you, and I know a lot of the people on this call, if you're not already in leadership roles, you will be. I hope you always remember that they may just want you to operate the camera, and that's a good thing. Just remember it. And I am done. If we want to show the pictures, I have to tell you, loved doing the one with me in the red is me running the legislative session at the convention. And I got to tell you, one of my favorite things on the planet, and that was one of the things I miss most, no longer being president, is they don't let me do that anymore. And I am enough, I'm no Mark Stratton, but I'm enough of a parliamentary nerd to really, really enjoy that a lot. And I will shut up now. Thank you all.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mark Stratton, and I pledged in the fall of 1994 at the Delta Xi chapter at Ball State University. So this is my 26th year in the fraternity. And from 2010 to 2014, I had the honor and the privilege to serve as the national president of Alpha Phi Omega. I have served with many of the presenters here. I know many of them. I served as Maggie's vice president for 4 years. When I pledged in Jerry's last semester as his time as national president. His signature's on my membership card. The 2010s really sort of, when we got to the convention in Atlanta, really began with the challenge to the fraternity of trying to increase our numbers of chapters to 500 chapters by 2025, our 100th anniversary. And that goal was set because it would require us to change how we do business in APO. We've always hovered around the same number of chapters, more or less, because we typically do things the same way. So very early on, following that convention, we started to do things like we created the National Student Advisory Committee, where a number of students from across the fraternity would serve on an advisory body to the national president and the national vice president. That later became codified in the national bylaws. So it's a permanent entity of the fraternity now, designed to get student input from active members today, get their input into policies and programs of the National Fraternity. Additionally, we continued discussions about restructuring the National Board of Directors during that time. Now, Jerry had mentioned that at the Constitutional Convention in '67, they changed our governing documents, the bylaws, and so on. That in 1967 was really the last major overhaul of the National Board of Directors. And that model served us well, but the board got to be about 41 members or so, and it really became unwieldy, both in terms of the numbers of members and the vast responsibilities every member of the board had. So discussions began actually in the early 2000s. They accelerated in the middle. Maggie had put groups together to try to develop a board restructuring plan and put them together. So Spree's comment that things in the fraternity happen because they build on things that come before. Board restructuring didn't happen because Mark Stratton got elected president. Mark Stratton just continued work that had been done by hundreds of other brothers in the fraternity to bring that to a conclusion. So in January of 2013, the board of directors approved the Leaders in Service fundraising campaign. Jerry had talked about the former, our former national office, the one that we opened in 1990, the one that was going to last for 50 years. And they raised money for that, to do that. And at that time, whatever the amount was, I think it was around $300,000 or so, was a lot of money to raise in 1980, the late 1980s, early 1990s. The Leaders in Service campaign had a goal of over $4 million. Part of which was to buy or build a new national headquarters. We wanted to stop calling it the office and call it the headquarters, so it meant more than just a building. Stan Carpenter once told me, Mark, when we built the office, we thought we would have the room, all the room we would ever need going forward. Well, they were wrong, and as Jerry said, but in a good way. The success, getting that office in the 90s, helped pave the way for running out of room in terms of the numbers of chapters, the numbers of brothers, the numbers of professional staff we needed to support. So this Leaders in Service campaign was designed to raise money to get a new headquarters, to provide for programming, to help improve the day-to-day experience of every single member of the fraternity. And so the fundraising began in earnest. And I would say, while we're on the call here, Jerry was kind enough to, at my request, although he might say insistence, to serve as the chair of that campaign cabinet, and Maggie served as a member of that campaign cabinet, and their leadership was instrumental in getting to where we were. In 2014, the fraternity launched an archive of all of our APO print publications. So brothers, especially those interested in the history of the fraternity, and we do have history buffs, some I've noticed are on this call, really now have access to that wealth of historical information. In 2015, when Brother Ottenod was president, the Alpha chapter was chartered at the University of British Columbia, which became the very first chapter in APO Canada, which was an awesome achievement. We've been talking about it for decades, and it finally happened. In 2016, I think well ahead of when people thought we might, the national office moved to our new headquarters in Kansas City, Missouri. The next slide has a picture, I think, of kind of the lobby or one of the open areas. And certainly the region chairs and program chairs who are on this call have seen that through their operations council meetings. In the 2014 convention in Chicago, the convention approved massive sweeping overhaul to the National Board of Directors, which took the board of directors from roughly 41 members, like every past national president, a whole host of others, down to about 11 members. So the board could operate more, we say nimble, with greater speed to be able to convene if they needed to on shorter notice. So that was approved in 2014. It took effect in 2016 at the convention in Pittsburgh. So we elected that new structure of the board, which basically there's the board of directors, which focuses on the budget, governance, and strategic long-term planning. and then the Operations Council, in which our region chairs and program chairs serve. As well, at the 2016 convention, the toast song, the words "men of" were removed from the toast song, and that had been an effort that had been ongoing for decades as well. In 2018, the Alpha chapter at Lafayette College was rechartered. As Spree said, when he was region director, those efforts had started. And that effort had sort of been started and stopped and started and stopped, finally came to fruition. As someone who participated in that event, it was a really awesome moment to be there, to be in Brainerd Hall, to see that charter presented. There was just nothing like it. And then in 2018, convention approved a regional realignment. Prior to that, there had been 11 administrative regions numbered 1 through 11. And now there are 18 administrative regions, and they are numbered by, they're not numbered, they're lettered, yeah, if you will. And then if we go to the next slide, there are just a few pictures here. And I'll just, in the upper left, that is the picture from the chartering ceremony at Alpha chapter at Lafayette College in 2018. To the right is one of the new open areas, the lobby or waiting area at our new national headquarters, which has tons of room. If you have never been to the national headquarters, I highly suggest you try to see it. The map on the lower right is the new regional map. Essentially, regions became a little smaller to make them more manageable for our region chairs. The picture in the middle is the chartering from Alpha chapter at APO Canada. And then to the right is the new and revised toast song. So thank you.
All right, brothers, I'll continue with the 2020s. My name is Melanie Martin. I am serving as the current National Vice President. I am a brother from Delta Alpha chapter at the University of Cincinnati and initiated in spring of '97, although I was actively involved in chapter activities for about 2 years prior to that. I live in Northwest Ohio right now. And earlier we were kind of jumping around with some favorite APO moments. And throughout this presentation, there's lots of pictures and lots of things that happen at national conventions. So I was going to throw out there one of the odd things that just came to mind recently as we approach something new in 2020 with a virtual legislative convention is the fact that we won't have the big banquets and the awards banquets that we've had in the past. And therefore, I won't be wearing the one formal dress that I've owned for the past decade or more. And this is sort of a funny story, and a few I hear are laughing already, but I got to figure out if it's 10 or 12 years ago, but it's many years ago. I bought a formal dress, a long black gown to wear to convention. And another brother was there wearing the same dress that day. And anybody who knows anything about women's fashion, showing up at a formal event wearing the same thing as someone else is not supposed to happen. But it did, and it became funny. And then oddly, I was like, well, I'm going to wear the dress again the next time. So it's become tradition that I wear that dress to the APO banquets every year. But alas, this year, probably not going to happen. So that's my current, APO moment. And we can switch to the rest of the things that have happened this year. So 2020, present day, it's been a rough decade, and we're only just a little bit into it. We've got some positive things going on, though. We have initiated our 500,000th member. That happened early this spring in the January-February timeframe. I remember being out at a regional conference out in California where that brother was not in attendance, but he's a brother from Southern California, and he was just completely in awe of, first him being selected and the fact that we are at 500,000 members of our organization, an amazing number. The National Membership Program Chair Brandon Fairchild gets a huge shout out. He and his committee have created a new pledge or new member education manual called Introduction to Alpha Phi Omega. And this takes on some of the language changes that were passed at the last national convention to include words like new member instead of pledge and brother, and allow the chapters to really decide for themselves what works best for the members or the potential new members of their chapter and of our organization. So we have probably the largest assortment and the largest volume of new resources developed in a short period of time that have been launched this year, purely because of the need. The pandemic has caused us all to move virtual. All of our chapters they all shut down in the spring and went virtual, and many have gone back to some version of 100% virtual to 100% in person and everything in between. So the national program, committee chairs, their committees, the national office staff has done just massive amounts of work to provide new resources to chapters. And I don't think that there's one of those email monthly torch topic blasts that goes out that doesn't list at least 6 or 8, possibly 10 or more new resources that are available for our chapters and for our members. So also a first this year, we've had our first ever virtual rituals and ceremonies held for chapters to invite our new members to be a part of what Alpha Phi Omega is. Virtual meetings, including things like this one, are being held at local, regional, and national levels. And I told someone before we started this presentation this evening that I'll consider this one of the benefits of a pandemic is that we all get to participate in an activity or an event, to celebrate our founding today. And if we would not have been in pandemic situations, I wouldn't be attending. If you can notice behind me, I'm sitting at a conference room at work, and technically I work until 8 p.m. So, going to an event that is 2 hours away would not have happened. So it's really, really great to be able to participate in things that are both local and things that are not local. I can be in Florida one day and Southern California the next, and maybe here in Region H somewhere in between. So tons and tons of change so far in 2020. I mentioned a little bit ago that we have our first ever virtual national legislative session coming up in just a few weeks. And, this is where the slide kind of ends, but obviously the decade doesn't end here. So I'm going to add to the bottom of the list for you all. Obviously, as a fraternity and an organization, today we're celebrating our 95th anniversary, which means that our 100th is just right around the corner. And that, 5 years will seem far away, but we'll get here very quickly. And planning for 100th anniversary celebration for Alpha Phi Omega, I think is going to be a lot of fun and something really to look forward to here in this decade. Also, I think we have learned in 1 year that we can navigate the new, as we'll call it, very quickly, and we adapt very well, and brothers adapt tremendously. So while we mentioned earlier in the 40s with the war effort, there was a significant loss in membership. Our fraternity is also seeing a decline in membership right now just because of the transition from the pandemic. And I think it's a challenge to all of us as this decade continues to really figure out, how do we share what we have with others? How do we help as alumni volunteers or even active members who are on this presentation? How do we share what we have and all of this amazing history that we have with the next generation and the future brothers that are going to be, celebrating with us at our 100th anniversary? So those things are just a few of the many ups and downs that have kind of happened this year. I know we've talked a lot about the national office and the board structure. Virtual has really allowed our leadership also to meet more frequently and for us to have conversations that we wouldn't have had before. In the past, the National Board of Directors or the Operations Council met twice a year in person someplace. And this year, the Board of Directors has met literally on a monthly basis because we have the technology now and we have the ability to, communicate with each other and just get on a phone call or a Zoom call and meet and discuss and make decisions much, much more quickly. So those kinds of things are positives. I said in a chat to someone or on a social media post that it's like, I miss seeing all of you in person. I miss your faces, and it's kind of cool to look over here. I keep looking off to the side, sorry, to see some faces that I don't see very often. So that's cool. I am not sure. Brittany, you'll have to flip to the next slide. I don't think there were any pictures yet. Oh, we got a few. I was going to say a few pictures of what this year has brought us. And I think, so our 500,000th member, Alex, is on the right there, but I think the one on the left definitely tells us, that we're resilient and we're able to move, move forward and move quickly, even when things are kind of, I don't know, just completely unknown. But the service will always be there, the friendship will always be there, and we'll all be leaders to lead the way.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you especially to all of our guest speakers that joined us. Like Melody was saying, this is so cool that we can all come from different cities, sections, even people from outside of our region that have joined us tonight, which is super exciting. Thank you all for taking the time to go through this presentation with us to honor our fraternity's history. I hope it was all a really beneficial presentation for you. I loved hearing everybody's stories. That was probably my favorite part. So thank you so much for adding some spice to our national history. I wanted to open up the floor tonight because we are celebrating our Founders Day and we've gone through a lot of history and big moments, but I love hearing more about the personal side of the fraternity and people's memories and maybe favorite moments. And I know some of our speakers have shared theirs already. So I would love to open the floor if anybody would like to share a favorite memory, something great that happened this year, or just an APO spark that you've had in our fraternity that has kept you involved and attached to our fraternity. So if you want to unmute yourself or raise your hand, I will do my best to kind of make it through the list. But who would like to share something first? Carlin raised her hand. Carlin, you want to go ahead?
Hi. So one of my favorite memories is from regionals last year. So I'm from the Taulanda chapter, and my chapter, Maggie is kind of a legend in my chapter. Like, she's not from our chapter, but like, yeah. And so last year at regionals, when I actually saw Maggie for the first time, I kind of lost it a little bit. Just because like this person who my chapter is constantly talking about is suddenly in front of me. And it just threw me off a little bit.
And I felt the same way meeting you, Carlin.
Oh, thank you for sharing. And Carlin's our H2 chair. She serves Southern Indiana. Would anyone else like to go next? Liam, go ahead. You have your hand raised.
Yeah, so my favorite memory is from the convention that never happened because of COVID, but the region convention when we had our planning meeting pre-COVID, and all of us were there that were on the committee. So myself and the service chair and Brittany was there and everything. But me and another person from H3, that was the service chair, we both got there early and we were going through all the service things. And in the lobby of the hotel, we ran into all these like fancy dressed guys and we're like, oh, why are you guys here? And they're like, oh, we're having our wedding. So we went out for tacos with this random group of groomsmen from the wedding. And they gave us like all our service ideas for the conference. And it was like even though it never happened, it like started like blanket making and like going to the Humane Society and everything, and like things we hadn't thought of. And it gave us so many ideas for the conference. And even though we didn't get to use them, it was still cool to have like all these random ideas from this random wedding party.
Oh, that's a great story. Thank you, Liam. Who wants to go next? Does anybody else have a favorite memory or an APO spark, maybe why you wanted to join?
I can give my one of my celebrity moments, I think, of APO that I had also at the our combined regionals we had with I for H was when I was going to introduce Coop to speak. I think for me it was one of those moments that I built up way bigger to introduce a national president. I was like, this is my time, this is my moment. And I think I first wrote a speech that was probably as long as the actual keynote speech and was like, this is it. And then I was like, maybe I should tone this down a little bit. And I definitely spent way too many hours on it to realize that I probably could have got up there and given a little bit shorter of a speech. But that was one of my big like APO celebrity moments looking back at it.
Thank you for sharing, Connor. Does anybody else have a special moment they want to share? Trey put something in the chat. He said his mic is giving him issues, but one of his favorite memories was meeting Jamie Conover-Stewart as an active and being introduced to the larger world of APO outside of his home chapter. And she is currently our National Pledge class namesake. So that was a really special memory. Thank you for sharing, Trey. If anybody else is having mic issues or you're driving or anything like that, you can put it in the chat as well. Okay, Brian, you want to go next?
I do. One of the moments that was a big APO spark for me was presenting Rachael, one of the region staff members who presented in the first session, her chapter DSK for Alpha Zeta Rho at Defiance College. It was really cool to work behind the scenes with the chapter at the time to get her out of the room, so it was a surprise. And then the culmination is when we brought her family in. And it was done during a ceremony at the college where we had her family come in after the ceremony ended. Her family kind of came into the room. We're all in the circle. And I think that's when she started really to feel the heat as to why is my family here. And then the dean of students that was there at the time called her out, and we got to present her with the chapter DSK. And just to see the pride of doing it in front of her family and the joy that she got to share with her parents of all that she had done in APO and all that she had done for the chapter was definitely a highlight of my APO spark.
Thank you for sharing. And that's an awesome memory with our region marketing chair. Rachel said in the chat, she was telling you that she better be your APO spark. Okay, anybody else want to share a spark or a special memory or maybe a reason you've joined or stayed involved in the fraternity for so long? Adam, did you want to go?
Yeah. For me, one of the sparks that I could recall was during the regionals for HI in last November or last year's fall semester. I was sitting in a risk management risk management class with Jerry on one side of me while Maggie was on the other, and we had a great time. I honestly don't remember anything what was said during the whole workshop besides us three just sharing stories with everything. So that really meant a lot to me. So I really appreciate seeing you both here. So thank you.
Thank you, Adam. That sounds like an awesome memory. Who would like to share next? Okay, I will share one of my favorite memories. I always choose a different one because I have so many different sparks to share, but since Stephanie and Sabrina are on here, I will choose this one. Back in 2014, it was my first year serving as a section chair for the Cincinnati-Dayton area, and we started a few petitioning groups that year, and one of them was at Wittenberg. And out of the 3 extension groups back then, they kind of hit the ground running and took off so fast, completing all of their requirements and recruiting their members. And with just a couple of years, they were already ready to charter. And Sabrina was on that executive board. She was chapter president at the time. That helped kind of see them through those final few months. And I know that that was such an enduring process and definitely super straining on the extension group at the time, but to see them come through that and to reach their chartering at the 2016 sectionals conference for Ohio. I remember bawling with their sponsor at the time and their chapter advisors during the ceremony. It was such a special moment. Everybody was crying, and it's so memorable to see the students that you had known for so many years finally get to the culmination of their efforts and receive their charter, and then to see where a lot of those members from that petitioning group, especially their executive committee that year, have gone on to do other things in the fraternity. Stephanie and Sabrina are two of our 6 section chairs right now. They cover Columbus and then Cincinnati area. And then there's a couple other students as well that are now section chairs in Michigan and somewhere on the East Coast as well. So it's really awesome to see that small group of students has now had such an impact on that chapter chartering and within our region and then even beyond. So that has been really cool to see in just the past 6 or 7 years. So that's one of my favorite memories. Anybody else would like to go?
Hey, Brittany, this is Regina. I'll share something. You kind of asked why we stayed involved so long. So I pledged in fall of '86 at the Mutah chapter at West Virginia Tech. And I was very fortunate to have some awesome advisors at my chapter. So when Pete and I got back involved in the fraternity back in '97, we helped recharter the Xi Epsilon chapter, who were the students that were holding the signs in that picture from the 20s that Melody had. At Mount Union College. And the reason we got back involved is I wanted to give back to what I got as an active. I had great advisors and I wanted to be that for other students. So one of our proudest moments was them rechartering in 9 months time frame. And then that was in '98. And then at the 2000 convention in Philly, I was even prouder when they won the National Service Award after being active for only 2 years. So that's why I'm still involved, is for the students. I want to give back to what I got as I was active.
That's wonderful, Regina. Thank you for sharing.
Brittany, I'll share one.
Okay, perfect.
It's not funny.
Okay.
Our daughter was a student at American University here in DC. And one day my wife came up to me and she played rugby. And my wife came up to me and she said, the rugby team is having a party and parents are invited. And this is my wife speaking, I can't go, will you go? Which was the last thing I wanted to do, go to a rugby party. But I went. And it was held at a beautiful farm out in Maryland near the river. And I pulled up in front of the, this gorgeous house, and I knocked on the door, and this young woman opened the door and she looked at me and she said, Mr. Schroeder, this is not a rugby party. Your daughter has pledged APO, and this is their initiation. And that was a very moving moment for me. And a few of you know this, but out of the woods walked John McGuire, who knew about it the whole time.
Oh, that's a really special story. Thank you for sharing, Jerry. Who would like to go next? Last call for any stories before we wrap up. Trey added in the chat that one of the things that keeps him going is the friendships that he has developed with actives and watching them grow into leaders. I love that. That is probably one of the best parts of the role, especially when you're working at the section or the region level, and you can see your students kind of grow, whether you're a chapter advisor or their section chair or a staff volunteer. That's probably one of the most special parts of being a volunteer. Anybody else? All right, well, thank you again so much for everyone for attending tonight's presentation. I am super excited that we were able to record this so that we can share it for everybody who wasn't able to be with us live. It was wonderful hearing so many stories from all of you as we went through our decades of history with our fraternity. And like Melody was stating, we have so much more yet to come. And it's really exciting that we're only 5 years away from our big 100th anniversary. I can't wait for that convention, and I'm sure it's going to be such an outstanding event. In the meantime, please hang in there and stay safe and keep an eye on your loved ones. We are in the midst of quite a crazy national pandemic, and I know this year has been an exhausting experience for a lot of us. And I think our fraternity has kept the ties strong that we needed to, so that we could rely on one another and stay true to our friendship and our bonds as brothers and make it through this experience and come out on top. And a huge kudos to our students who have made it through and become such strong leaders in the face of adversity this year. And I love seeing so many of you on this call tonight so that you can hear and learn about our history from some of our alumni volunteers and some of our past national presidents and board members and things like that. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you to all of our guest speakers for being here tonight and participating. And thank you for everybody for joining our storytelling here at the end of the presentation. Our next event we have scheduled is going to start at 10. So if you want to hang around and play some virtual online games or some BuzzFeed quizzes with our RSAC group, you are more than welcome to. And then we will close out the evening with a toast song later on. So in the meantime, you've got about a 25-minute break. Thank you so much for being here. If you need anything, feel free to shoot it over in the chat or reach out anytime. Love you all. Lots of love and LFS to everybody. And I look forward to seeing you on our next Zoom event. Have a great night, brothers.
Thanks, Brittany. It was awesome.
Good.
Thanks. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Brittany, for having us.